Hello and welcome back. If you haven't been to my channel before, this is Vickie's Country Home. I live off-grid on 40 acres in northern Nevada, and I have goats and chickens and dogs and cats. I cook, can, make sourdough bread, dehydrate, all kinds of things, and you never know what I'm going to try next. If you like what you see, please go down below and hit the subscribe button and be sure and click the notification bell. Make sure it says all notifications, but also make sure your device shows that you get alerts for the notifications, because a lot of people say they're not getting any notifications, and that could be why. So check that out if you're already a subscriber, and if not, I would really appreciate you subscribing. It helps my channel and helps me provide more content for you. I have done several haul videos on Azure Standard, and I love their products. I buy a lot of things in bulk, and especially non-GMO, organic grains, all kinds of bulk foods from them. I also buy them from other sources. I just pick and choose where I want to be organic and where I can do without that, and where I can find it locally. So I like buying in bulk. I live an hour from the closest grocery store. It's not feasible to run into town when you run out of something. So for that and many other reasons, I store food. We've been cut off from going into town for a few weeks at a time also. So there's a lot of considerations for me. For you, it may look totally different. But I do like buying in bulk. And then the question has been asked multiple times, how do you store it? And I have been asked to show how I store it. I can't show you everything how I do it because I use a lot of methods, but I'll try and cover a good amount today, just give you some ideas. I have a local grocery store, Winco, and some of you may have it too, and they have bulk bins. Ours are back open. I don't know if they are in other places, but our bulk bins are open. I have never had amaranth, and I wanted to try it. It's a grain, and it's not keto, so that's why I haven't used it yet, but I wanted to buy it while I had the opportunity. So right now, my other bag was leaking, so I just put it in a Ziploc temporarily until I had time to do this, and so you're gonna get to see that. So I try and choose a jar that it fits in, and I'm thinking it may be a little bit much for this pint. So a lot of my storage is in canning jars. And, you know, if I've got some that aren't really nice for, you know, maybe they've got imperfections, and those do happen, you have to always check your jars. If I find those are the ones that I will use for bulk foods, dry food storage. I also have a whole lot of antique that have been given to me, and I'm not going to use those for canning. So those are all great for dry goods. So I'm going to take this amaranth, and let me put the camera down so you can see. These are tiny little grains, and the reason I had to do this in the bag was because somehow it got poked, and with these being such tiny little grains, they were going everywhere, so that wasn't great. You know, that will probably fit. You know what, I'm gonna try. I think that will fit in a pint jar. and it fits perfect. So that can be cleaned and used for something else. Now the question is this short-term or is this long-term? I don't think this is going to be long-term because I want to try it. I want to see what it's like and see if I want to buy more. So that would be a shorter-term product. You make sure your rim is good, that there's no nicks or anything like that. And I use old canning lids. Now I have a tool, and this is vintage. You can't just go down to the local grocery and buy it or hardware store, whatever. I ordered these off eBay, and they are not inexpensive. However, they do the best job ever taking lids off without destroying them, without bending them, causing any damage, and effortless. It is perfect for people that have any kind of problems with their hands. And so I like to use used lids since that does not bend my lids. And this one has pretty good sealant on it, so I'm not too worried about it. But it's got this writing on top. We can take care of that. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and put a ring on it. But I will be vacuum sealing this, but I'm going to do them all at once so I don't have to keep getting it out. But if you can go and find these, I bought myself a backup just because I will be very upset if I ever misplace this or anything happens to it. So I went online and bought another off of eBay, and this is what it is, pry lid. I'm going to tell you, they're worth every penny I spent. And they almost look like two different brands, but they basically do the same thing. So if you're interested, again, I can't give you a link. You know how eBay is, but look up pry lid. This is another bulk that I bought somewhere else. I think it's our local organic grocery store. They don't have a lot of bulk, and last time I checked, they were still packaging everything up, and you couldn't just get whatever quantity you wanted. But at least they still have their bulk goods. These are roasted, unsalted, organic sunflower seeds. And I have some keto recipes that call for that. You grind them up, you make sunflower butter, but I haven't done it yet. So that's gonna go in a jar. And that, I'm putting in this antique jar. Now you have a problem finding these gaskets. I have anyway. I have had so much trouble finding them. So far, my solution is, because these antique jars, they're dried, they're cracking, and they're not any good. My solution so far, I have Harvest Guard reusable lids. They're like Tattlers. And these are just a tiny bit small, but I found if you stretch them just carefully, you can put them around, and that will form a seal. And there we go. And to label these, it doesn't always work, but I will try to take the label off of this. Sometimes you can peel it off just gently enough. And that label will go on the jar, which is perfect because it has all of the information that you could want on it. And again, just peel very slowly, very carefully. There we go. So I'm gonna put the label on this jar. And my cat is saying, you have food. Why don't you share it with me? I don't think I will. You get plenty, believe me. You're not getting any of this. So there you go. The label works perfect. A little bit crooked, but I really don't care. It has the information that I want and that I need. Tells me what it is, tells me nutrition, and even tells me when it was packed and everything else right here on my jar. And since that is not long-term, I'm not worried about vacuum sealing that. I'll be using it fairly soon. Now this I bought from Azure Standard, and this is dry diced celery stalk. I don't use a whole lot of celery in my cooking, and I'm not going to buy a lot of it and keep it in my refrigerator that then goes bad. I've wrapped it in foil, and it does keep it very good. I'm not sure how safe that is, but it does work. It may not hurt it, but that's just not something that I want to do unless I'm just going to buy it and use a whole lot. So here I have a 1/2 gallon big ball jar. Now this is probably going to be more than enough to fill this jar. I do shake it down and it settles pretty well. Now this one, again, always check your rim. This one will be for longer term storage, and it'll go in my extended pantry. So I'm going to vacuum seal this one also. Now you can use oxygen absorbers if you want. I haven't found it to be necessary. I have them, I use them, but I usually use them in bigger quantities and for different things. Although this is long-term, I would say more mid-term. I'm not going to use that much immediately, but I will use it not too far down the road. And I have this much left. So that will go in a quart jar. So I'm just going to take what's left and put that in a quart jar. Now this will be closer at hand in my kitchen pantry because this is what I will work out of. Now this is one of my pre-used lids, and again, it's not bent, it's not dented, anything like that. The rubber still looks pretty good. You'll notice you might be able to see faint writing because what I've done is, and I'll do this while the jars are closed. I write with Sharpie, and normally that stuff just doesn't come off. But if you use nail polish remover, now I'm doing this while the jar is sealed, and it took the writing off. So that's just a little tip if you reuse your canning jar lids, especially nowadays when you're lucky if you can find the lids. And on the celery, and it's not going to come off clean. Most of the time I can get the Azure Standard labels off very cleanly. But when I can't, I take a pair of scissors. Cut around it. And I'll wipe off the back. This is going to go outside the jar, and I don't want food to be outside of the jar. Now for the celery powder, since I could not peel the label off cleanly, I have packing tape. And I still use the label, but I tape it on. I don't know if this is what other people do, but this is what works for me. So once I vacuum seal this, this will go in my pantry too. This one, since it's not long-term and I don't have another label, I'm just going to write on it. Because again, if I need to, I can always remove that. But this is in my working pantry, so it doesn't matter too much. Sometimes if something is in my working pantry, depending on what it is, I will also use these plastic lids. Not too often, because most of the time I'm trying to protect from moisture and I want a good seal on it. These don't have a really good seal. Now I have found that you can buy silicone gaskets that fit these, and that does give it a good waterproof seal, but most of the time I'm not going to get those out and do that, so I don't use those too much unless it's just in the refrigerator for a few days, something like that. Now to vacuum seal my jars, I have two choices. I have actually three ways to do this, but normally what I'm going to use is either my large vacuum sealer. I have Weston, so it's pretty big and heavy. I also have this Fresh Saver, and this is okay, it works all right, and I have a video on that. It's another option. Most of the time that thing's not charged. I don't keep things plugged in all the time because of power use, even when they're turned off. So my other option is a brake bleeder, and I found this from Heidi at Rain Country, and it works. It's a little bit of work to do it. Make sure that the hose is attached well and you've got this little adapter on it. Again, you make sure your lid and your rim are clear, if anything. You put on just the lid, not the ring. And then you have this vacuum sealer attachment, and they are purchased separately. You have to get one for wide mouth and one for regular mouth. And then, I'll try to do this so you can see, but I'm kind of backwards. So I've got that attachment pressed onto the jar. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see. And I do find it easiest to brace it on the countertop while I use it. And you just want to do this until it stops moving. And then we'll see if it's created a seal. So I heard a little bit of a hiss. My cat is playing with something. And that is sealed. I can pick it up by the lid. I add a ring, and I do tighten the ring up pretty well. I want to make sure that it keeps that vacuum seal. So there we go, that's one. I'll do these others later, partly to give my forearm a rest, but that's how you vacuum seal jars. Or again, you can use your attachment that goes on your vacuum sealer. That's the easiest, except getting out my machine. So I don't always do it. Then we come to buckets. And when I really buy something in bulk, I use buckets. Depending on what it is, how much, and how long term I want to store it, I normally will get a Gamma Seal lid. And these are wonderful. They're not for every bucket. If you're storing grain long term, you're not going to be accessing it for whenever. You can just use the regular pop-on lid, and that works just great. However, with a Gamma Seal, it's not attached. I'm not ready to use it. It's a two-piece lid. So you have this ring that gets attached to the bucket, and it's a press-on. And these usually go on pretty good. I have some that are not the same brand that I buy at Winco, and they work great once you get them on the bucket. They're a little bit harder to put on. But the wonderful thing, and these cost a little bit, but the wonderful thing about it, you're not prying off a big lid. And believe me, I do that with my soap making things and others, and it's kind of a pain. So if you can use the Gamma Seal, you can get in and out of your buckets when you need to. And I store things like I buy sugar in bulk. I don't use a lot, but it just works better for me to buy it in bulk. I have it when I need it. I do some grains with Gamma Seal. I do some flour with Gamma Seal, some beans, and they may be in individual packages within there, but it keeps them protected because they're sealed. I'm not saying rodents couldn't get into this, but it's a little bit harder than thinner packaging. Several years ago, and one of the reasons I have these insane cats in my house is because we did get some field mice in here, and oh, it was horrible. I had to totally take everything out of my pantry. Boxed and bagged things got thrown away. I had to clean every jar, every container, and I don't really want to deal with that. So if I can prevent them, then that's what I'm going to do. And that is one of the reasons for the buckets. And also it allows me to buy in bulk. And again, that's what I like to do for many reasons. I also have, this is a 5-gallon. I do have 6-gallon buckets also, which are good for some things. But for a lot of things, the 5-gallon bucket will hold it. Again, get a Gamma Seal lid. This is a different size than I think that's 2 or 3 gallon, I don't remember. I think it's 3.5 gallon. These are the 5-gallon lids and 5-gallon bucket. And this would be for your 25 and 50 pound purchases. this is a good size for storing that. 6-gallon buckets are even bigger, and those will hold most bags that I buy. They are heavy though when you get them filled, so I have to be mindful of that because sometimes that's hard for me. Now, if you're using your buckets for long-term storage, I highly recommend, for most things, not all, mylar bags. Go online and find them in bulk. They have some at Azure Standard. In fact, I just bought these. These are 1-gallon zip top mylar bags, and these are 1-quart zip top mylar bags, which allows me to put in smaller amounts. And mylar bags are wonderful. They are easy if you can get the ones with the zip top, but they do cost a little more. And with the zip top, you do have the ability to get in and out of it as long as you don't seal it any other way. For 5 and 6-gallon buckets, you use a big one. And these I have done many times. They're very good. The one problem with mylar, you have to be very careful storing it. Somehow this one got a puncture. And that I can fix it as long as then I'm going to mark it so that I know. In fact, I'm going to just draw around it. I can fix this the same way that I seal these bags. And believe me, I never bought this for my hair because it's really not a problem, but it's a hair straightener. So with this, I have used an iron and a 2x4, and that works fine. It's awkward, but it works. And then I saw a tip on using this, and it was like, that is a great idea. So I went and bought myself a hair straightener. So to repair this bag, what I'll do is I'll cut just above that puncture. And then I'll heat up the iron, and it's not hot right now, but I will just go along the end of the bag, just like that with the hot iron. And I'll do that 2, maybe 3 times, just to make sure that it's completely sealed. That will allow me to use this bag so that I don't waste it. To use this to seal the bag, if this is long-term storage, for most things, it might be a good idea to put oxygen absorber in there, which is, looks like this. This is a whole bunch of them, but the air is sucked out of there so that they don't go bad. So depending on the size of the bag, depends on how many cc's, and that's how they're sold. Packs different size. These are I think it says 2,000 cc's, and these would probably be the size I would use in a bucket. But if I were storing grain or beans or something like that, I would probably put them in mylar and use oxygen absorbers with them. What you do is you get the bag fitted into your bucket. You pour your grain or beans or whatever into the bag, and then you want to get it as straight as you can. And it's going to be awkward because this has to be in a circle. But it can happen. It just takes a little bit of effort. And you pour everything in, you make sure it's all smooth. Then you're going to you're going to get the top so that it's mostly flat, which is one of the reasons you have such a big bag. And what I do is I will seal about 2/3 to 3/4 of the top of the bag. and I will go over it a couple times. I want to make sure it's totally sealed, because once you open those oxygen absorbers, they're going to start absorbing oxygen, and you want it to absorb from the contents of the bag. So once I've got it sealed to here, I'll drop in the oxygen absorbers, press out as much air as I can, but I don't obsess on it. That's what those are for. And then I'll continue to seal the bag. It's a few steps. It's not really hard, and once you get into the rhythm, it's pretty easy to do. But that is how I would store long-term grains, beans, anything like that that you need to protect from moisture, from light, and oxygen. So that's what I would do. Now there's other items that you don't want moisture in, and that can cause you a big problem. So I have two things here. I have humidity indicator cards that will show how much humidity is in something, and I have desiccant packs. This is silica gel desiccant, and these are food grade. They're good for food, medications, anything like that. So you can put that in there, and that will help absorb any moisture that may be in it. And moisture can do a lot of damage. So if it's something that you're concerned about that way, you might look into these. Now, we are going to fill a bucket, but we're not going to use a bag. Now, one of the things that I told you, first we're going to get the snapper in. Some items do not use oxygen absorbers. That's what this is for. I got this at Harbor Freight when I was making soaps and going to soap shows and selling them and all that. And I use this thing all the time. And I have another one outside that I use that's bigger in the winter for breaking up the ice on my goat's water. That becomes a problem for me. So I've got that on there. And let's just test it, because we want to make sure it's on and that the lid works smoothly. And it does. So now this bucket is going to be easy to access. Now this is another Azure Standard purchase. And I got this on my last purchase, and I just haven't put it up yet. And it's not something, again, that I use all the time. But it costs less to buy in bulk and store it. And so that's why I do it. This is organic cane sugar from evaporated cane juice. And I've bought it in smaller amounts from them. I love it. That's what I use whenever I can when I use sugar. Some things don't do well. One of them is hummingbird nectar. You can't use this in hummingbird nectar. You have to use white sugar. So I do buy white sugar in bulk. And I'm going to put this down to fill it. So you might not see it just because I'm not tall enough for that. Okay, that is 25 pounds of organic cane sugar. And you can see it doesn't quite fill. About to here. But that's okay. It just costs less buying it this way than 5-10 pound bags. Now, you do not use oxygen absorbers on sugar or salt. They don't need it, and you want to have one solid cake of sugar, that's what you would get. So you don't need it, don't waste the money, and don't make more work for yourself. So now I've got my organic cane sugar. It is sealed in there tightly. This lid has a great seal. And this is another one there. I'm going to try and peel this label off. And sometimes they come so well. This one took the paper off, so I'm gonna have to tape it on, but that's okay. And on a bucket, you have plenty of room, so it's not a problem. Now, anytime you're packaging food up for storage, it's a good idea to wipe down the container when you're done, just to make sure that there's nothing that can attract insects or anything else. And you don't want to lose your hard-earned food storage. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it gave you some ideas on how to store foods. I also use vacuum seal bags, but that's for usually different purposes. That's freezer, refrigerator, things like that. Occasionally something that's dried, but normally I like to use glass or buckets just because they protect so much better. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you got some ideas on how maybe you can buy in larger quantities and store it, save money in the process, and make sure that your family has what they need when they need it. Thank you for watching. God bless, and we'll talk soon.